Hello, welcome to the first of our two hopefully very exciting presentations tonight. It's the first time I'm publicly speaking, also the first time I'm using one of these. Never got the chance. So I'm speaking about Symfony and Elasticsearch, and then Adam later is taking over to talk about Silius. That's my Twitter handle. My slides should be tweeted out by now. Scheduled tweet should be now. I first got interested in Elasticsearch when I built an app called Must. Must is a personal recommendation app. You recommend each other nice places to go to, must do, must drink, must have, must see. And Must is a very search-focused app. That's why I got interested in Elasticsearch. It's not only search-focused, but also geo-focused. So you have both elements of typing in words and keywords, but also location. And that's where Elasticsearch is very strong and quite straightforward, easy to set up. Why I am delivering this talk, I struggled quite a bit at the beginning because there were so much outdated documentation, so many things that are actually irrelevant, and it turned out to be so simple in the end. Like I had like 20 lines of code, and I was like, why did it take me like 2 weeks to get to these 20 lines? So I hope by telling you like which pieces to just dismiss and where to go, maybe I can save one or the other a few sleepless nights, or maybe afternoons of headache. So I'm first going to speak about the dependencies, Elasticsearch itself obviously, but then also a PHP client and the Symfony 2 bundle. We can set up a development environment within 15 minutes. I tested it, it's actually 15 minutes. Some debugging tools that I found very helpful, in particular working with Elasticsearch. You might know some of them already. Maybe some of them are new, hopefully. Then we have some simple queries to Elasticsearch that are just search all, filters, ranking, scoring, boosting. And lastly, geo-bounding box query. That's just having a map and finding things that are within this geo-bounding box. More to that later. A few words about Elasticsearch. It's a search server written in Java. It's based on Lucene, which is an information retrieval library, and it makes the features of Lucene available via a JSON API. Also, the documents are all in JSON, so there's a lot of JSON there, which is nice. At least I thought so. And it's very popular. Wikipedia claims that it's the most popular enterprise search engine currently used. Some people using it Uber, Netflix, but also Stack Overflow, SoundCloud, Wikimedia, and eBay. So it does seem to be very popular. Knowing that, I had a look at it's open source, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know. I had a look, oh yeah, wrong slide, okay. First, some cool features, amongst others, stemming fuzzy search, which factors in typos, so you type something but it's not exactly what you meant, and fuzzy search will still get you results. Autocomplete, search alerts, which can be helpful, like, let's say you're flat hunting in London, you type in your query, and 5 days later your perfect house comes up. Elasticsearch will notify you, at least as a developer, and then you can notify your users. More like this queries, and before mentioned geodistance bounding box queries. So yeah, knowing that it was so popular, I had a look at their GitHub repository, and I was surprised, maybe naively surprised, that it has almost 1,000 open issues. Having a closer look at it, I realized that it's just a very high turnover of issues. So within 1 week there was 120 closed and 37 new issues. Also within 1 week there was 65,000 source line of codes changed. So it's a project that seems to be evolving quite rapidly, and there seem to be a lot of changes, most obviously. That makes it very difficult for documentation to keep up with the changes. So on the official documentation, and a definitive guide to Elasticsearch, you find a lot of these boxes saying this is out of date, we're going to update it at some point. It also makes it a bit harder for the community to keep up with depending projects like a PHP client and depending libraries. Yeah, because there's so many changes all the time. Coming to these PHP clients, they basically just give a programmatic interface to the features exposed by the JSON API. There's two of them. There's the official client, which is elasticsearch-php. Is the microphone working?
Yes.
I don't have these monitor boxes they have on stage when they're playing or something. So it was developed in 2013, and having said that it's the official library, they have paid developers, and development is reasonably fast, so it doesn't lag behind too much. The way it operates is it wraps the JSON API into a simple array structure that makes it almost unnecessary to have documentation, because you basically just wrap the JSON object into an array, which is almost the same. So they don't have much of a documentation, but it's not that bad. And then there's Elastica, which started development in 2010 and was there before the official one, and now is still being developed. Elastica is a lot different because it uses objects rather than just array structure. So you need this step of translating your JSON query to Elasticsearch into objects. And that is a bit of a problem because their documentation is really bad. And you're just looking at these classes trying to figure out how they translate into JSON later. And that is a bit of a problem, but there's kind of a fix of that. And they don't have paid developers either, because it's not the official one, and it's just open source, nice people doing good work. But obviously, as no one is paid for it, it's a bit slower. And then lastly, there's FOSS Elastica bundle, which wraps Elastica into a Symfony bundle and comes with listeners for doctoring events. Which is very, very nice because it takes care of all the indexing automatically. So when you create, update, or delete an entity, Elasticsearch is automatically being notified, and it all syncs nicely automatically without you making any effort. It also can work with serializers, which comes in handy when you work with APIs. When you build RESTful APIs or other APIs in Symfony, you will be working a lot with serializers already, and it's just nice you can use them and reduce some configuration steps. Now, yeah, the lagging behind is obviously a bit of a problem. Elasticsearch is developing very quickly. We have 2.2.0 at the moment. Elastica, the PHP client, hasn't caught up with that, and obviously FOSS Elastica bundle hasn't either. Then there's 2.1.1, which Elastica has caught up with, but not FOSS Elastic bundle. So we are kind of stuck with the 1.x branch, even though there is kind of a fix for that as well. More to that in a second. And Elasticsearch 2.x is very nice. There's lots and lots of improvements, which makes us hope that very soon we'll be able to use them officially. The reason why it's not being done yet is because the person being in charge of the repository doesn't want to go ahead unless we avoid backwards compatibility breaks. So they just want to support both the old versions of Elastica and Elasticsearch and the new versions. So the only thing we can do is just fix it locally and hope they will catch up very soon. The way we do it is with a bit of a hacky composer JSON hack. What I did is I just forked the official repository, changed their composer to JSON, used it as a fix in my project's composer to JSON, and there we go, we're all happy. we just need to make sure that we're not actually using anything that doesn't work yet. So what you can do to avoid that is you run the tests of FOSS Elastica Bundle, you see where they're failing, and then you know where it's not compatible yet, and you can work around that, avoid it, or see if maybe you don't need this functionality at all. So maybe it's not even a problem. And hopefully very soon they will catch up. That was the first part, the dependencies. It's quite complex, it's a three-level dependency stack. But once you fix that kind of, you can get ready and get your dev environment ready. I quite like to use Vagrant and Docker for my development environments. It's nice they find their way into version control, especially because it's only for development. Within one file I can define both my Docker containers for Elasticsearch and for my LAMP stack, which I run Symfony on. So just a quick overview of what this is. It loads a Ubuntu server distribution into a Vagrant virtual machine, and then downloads Docker and downloads the Elasticsearch Docker container. And basically with one shell command, your Elasticsearch is ready to run locally for development and play. And yeah, so you run Vagrant up and it's ready on the defined IP address, and you can curl the IP address you defined, and the response it will give you is this. You might know this from the Elasticsearch documentation, or if you ever get there, you will see it on one of the first pages. It just replies the current version and the tagline you know for search. Yes, so we are ready with our Vagrant and Docker-powered Elasticsearch. It's all up and running on a defined IP. So having Symfony running alongside with it, we just need to put this IP address in the Symfony 2 config, and we basically linked our Symfony to that new server. That's what it looks like. And the next step is that you get a test entity just to see, or maybe a real entity. I used public properties in this case just to make it a bit easier. I do realize it's not best practice. It's just when you later try to see what the results are, it's just easier printing public properties, and you can change it all when you develop real stuff. So this is just an example entity, very simple one, a blog post with an auto-generated ID, a caption and the content. You can see the doctrine configuration, all very simple and straightforward. And that's all you need to get started. Then the configuration of FOSS Elastica Bundle. Obviously, you need to let FOSS Elastica Bundle know that you now want to have this entity indexed with all new documents being created. It's relatively simple. For this example, is basically copy-paste from the documentation. Loads of tildes, that means that we're using the default configuration. Basically what you do is say persistence is an ORM and this and that entity, and the rest is just default configuration. Same for the properties. You just list the properties you want to have indexed and use the default configuration. You can obviously change them later on, and there's loads of nice options. But to get started, that's a very good starting point. If you want to reuse them, you can use node anchors. That's a YAML feature. Have a look at the documentation. And there's a second way to configure it. Instead of just using the config.yaml, you can use a serializer. I had word that now the Symfony serializer is preferred over the JMS serializer, but I haven't quite caught up, so I'm still using JMS serializer at the time. It's quite simple. You just have the usual mapping of the serializer. You define a group of whatever name, Elastica just seems logical. And expose certain properties to Elastica. That means they're going to be indexed. Right. So there we are. We have our first entity. We have defined properties to be indexed. So we just need to update our schema in the database, populate everything to Elasticsearch. That's the 2 comments at the top. And we can have a look at what's happened. So if we curl the app index, and there's the query string pretty, which is very helpful. Whenever you want to read something on the command line rather than actually use it programmatically, the pretty query string helps you to make it readable. It just plots it nicely. So if you query a newly created index, you will see we have these 2 fields here, caption and content, and everything is default configuration, string, and the settings are default configuration as well. But it's nice to see that, so you know what you could change if you wanted to. So you just need to add some records now, obviously, so you can search on something, and you get to search. And this would be the very simple, very first search. As you can see, FOSS Elastica exposes a finder for every index you create. We created the app index, and we have the blog post entity. So automatically a service will be available to you, FOSS Elastica.finder, your index name, your entity name. And that finder is very easy to use if you only want to have this very first, very simple search, which is Symfony on all fields that are indexed. And results will then contain an array or an array collection, depending on, I'm not sure, it's sometimes this and sometimes that. Yes, and you can return it as a JSON response to your browser to see what's happening. That's also helpful if you have public properties for this test, so you will actually get to see something in the browser. If they're all private or protected, you won't see anything here. But you can see it's a 3-liner, very simple for the very first, very basic search. So that's the 15 minutes environment. The next thing, many people might know this already, when you open a page that is generated by Symfony and it's in the debugging mode, then in the response headers there will be a link to the Symfony profiler. That is very, very helpful in this case. So if you have a look at the headers, copy paste this link and just open it, you will get this debugger. And it has an Elastica menu item on the left, and it will just show you the most recent query that went from Symfony to Elasticsearch. And it's very helpful. It shows you both the query and a test curl command that you can then use on the command line to just see what's happening. If you just start out with Elasticsearch, it's obviously very important to see what's happening behind the scenes, so you can debug and get used to all the configurations and just see what happens. Very important is that you should be adding the query string pretty to this, otherwise it will just return this tiny piece of JSON that is not readable in the command line. A second way to see what's happening is the Chrome logger. It's a feature of the Symfony logger. You can configure Symfony so it logs things to your Chrome JavaScript console. This is the snippet that achieves it. You need to add the Chrome PHP, the Chrome logger extension to your browser, and you will see the exact same thing in your console when it's happening. I found it slightly less easily readable, but maybe also helpful. And so this is the command we saw just a second ago in the profiler, executed on a command line. This is the response. So this is our first search on Elasticsearch. Quite interesting to see is the lower part, which is the hits. So you have one hit for our search term Symfony, which is a blog post titled Symfony Meetup, and it has a score on of 0.1 something. Also interesting to see the ID field. That's the doctrine ID you have in the database. that's both going to be interesting in a second. Filters and scoring. For filters, and so we had this very basic search now, right, where you just type in a keyword and we just query all fields, and that's it. If you want to do more, have a look at this folder. It's the Elastica Library folder, and in particular the query folder. That's where you find all the different types of queries and their corresponding objects. And given that the documentation is quite bad, this will basically your only point of getting to know something about the library. So just go there, check them all out, and compare them to the Elasticsearch documentation, and that's how you will succeed, hopefully. Very interesting is that all the filters were deprecated in the last version of Elastica and Elasticsearch. So just ignore the filter folder altogether. They're deprecated and will be removed soon, and they cost me a lot of headache. And the newer queries are actually a lot easier to use. So yeah, it's just for your own benefit to ignore the filters. Yeah, so the filtered query and all filters are deprecated in Elastica 3 and in Elasticsearch. This is a slightly more complex search query making use of these queries. So you have the Boolean query at the top. This is kind of what wraps it all. This is what replaces the filters. Before, you used to have a search query that matches certain items, and then you had filters that just radically filters them out. Now we got rid of this entire concept, and instead we just score things. So we have add should and add must. Add must is basically what used to be a filter. If it doesn't match this part, it will just be dropped out. If it should, then it just increases the relevancy and the score. So it will be in there and will increase the score. And we got rid of the entire concept of filters. And this quite nicely actually maps then to JSON. With the Boolean query at the top, you have should and must, and yeah, once you just use it's way easy. It translates way more nicely. Oh yes, a question.
Sorry, if it's all right to.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
With the must, does that apply with the fuzzy logic at this point, or?
No, at this point it doesn't. It could, but not in the default configuration. So yeah, this version with a Boolean query and must and should just translates a lot more nicely to JSON. So it's a lot easier to see what's actually happening. So when I first started trying all this out, I used all these filters and different query types, and it was very confusing how it translated to JSON. This is very straightforward. So the newer versions are improved greatly. This is the results from the query. Again, the lower part is the interesting bit. We have a score again. So Elasticsearch determined that 0.02 would be the relevancy of this blog post. There's only one, so it's also the highest relevancy of the set. Now the score is quite interesting because we have caption and content, which are equally important at the moment. And it matched caption, and that's kind of somehow how it calculated the score. What we can do is say caption is more important or content is more important, and that way the score increases or decreases depending on where Symfony the keyword is found. That's controlling relevancy. You do that in your config YAML just by adding a boost. So a boost of 1.5 on a certain field obviously means that if it's found there, it's just 1.5 times more important than it's found in another field. Yeah, so far to the simple queries. And next, the geobound and box queries. Geofunctions, there's kind of three options in Elasticsearch. You can have higher relevancy when closer to a point. So you say, well, I want all the posts if they match, but if they're very close to myself, then they're more important and their score should be boosted. You can filter them within a radius by adding a must. So if they're not within 20 miles around myself, I just will dismiss them. And lastly, you will have the bounding box, and that looks like this. This is a screen grab from Airbnb. It's quite common on hotel sites, etc. You just change your bounding box, and the prior search results disappear and new search results appear. And this is basically what the bounding box is. You pass in the corners of your box, and anything that is located within this box will be part of your search results. And it's quite nice. You can combine that with all kind of other stuff. You can say, well, it needs to be in the bounding box, but it should be scored higher if the price is closer to this and that, and if the caption contains this and that. So the Boolean queries are very nice to combine different search aspects and give them different relevancy, and then calculate an overall score by which you order your search results. Now to achieve this geo-bound box search result, I created an embeddable, which is the geo-point. So it's a doctrine embeddable. We'll later embed it into our blog post. So say the blog post is about a certain location, like maybe about tonight, and it's a counting house. So we have this embeddable, geopoint, longitude, latitude, and a toString function. So the current version of Elasticsearch uses strings to represent coordinates. It's changing now, but yeah, not quite yet. And then we just include that in our blog post. So in addition to the caption and the content and ID we had earlier, we now have a geopoint, which is embedded as a doctrine embeddable. Yeah, and the last point is again the mapping. It's quite straightforward. You have your geopoint attribute in addition to caption and content, but you can't use the default configuration because that would be a string. You set it to type geopoint, and that's it. Again, you populate to Elasticsearch, add some records, and another very interesting debugging tool at this point is if you have the ID of your entity in your database, you can use that to query Elasticsearch and see what it indexed. So let's say I just added 4 entities and I want to see what's happened. You just query your IP, your index, your entity, and the ID, and you can see exactly what Elasticsearch indexed. So in this case, it's a caption, a content, and a geopoint, and you go to search, and this is the geo-bounding box search. It's pretty much the same than we had earlier with the Boolean query. In this case, it's an add must because it must be in the bounding box. It shouldn't only be there. And yeah, the interesting about these coordinates is you can pass them to Elasticsearch as either a string or a array or an object. I found the strings to be the most straightforward because it's quite difficult to. They reverse the order for arrays and then keep them the same for objects because of GeoJSON, which is a convention to just reverse them for some reason. I found it very confusing. So you don't label them, you just turn them around. Makes it very hard for anyone who just reads the code. So I found strings easiest to pass in, just comma-separated values. And you pass your top left corner and your bottom right corner, and it will simply return all results that are in this bounding box. Now the results variable will again be filled with an array of doctrine entities, and you can either print them or use them in whatever way you want. This is the result the Elasticsearch server passes to Symfony because before was Elastica bundle then turns it into entities. So yeah, again, I think very straightforward. This is the result. Again, your bounding box actually changing results. Yeah, there's some further reading if you're interested. The Elasticsearch reference is up to date. The definitive guide is not. So always refer to the reference. Very interesting is the query DSL, which describes all these things I just said in more detail and more exhaustive. Yeah, just don't use the definitive guide. You will be more confused than it will help you. The Elastica reference is quite nice, even though very sparse. There's about 10 pages on there, so you can go on there, but it won't last you long. And then lastly, FOSS Elastica Bundle has a okay documentation on GitHub, also a bit outdated. One guy I found wrote quite interesting stuff about Elasticsearch is Sloan Ahrens. It's quite advanced stuff, but if anyone is interested in more advanced stuff, he's definitely a good guy to follow. And then also all these huge tech companies like Uber, Facebook, Stack Overflow, on their tech blogs they publish a lot of stuff about their tech, about their stacks, and Elasticsearch is often part of it. So there's cool videos of their tech leads speaking on tech conferences. They're really interesting as well. Yeah, and thanks for listening. If you want the slides, they're on my Twitter account. Any questions I can attempt to answer? Yeah.
Why did you choose Elasticsearch over Solar?
Simply because there was a Symfony bundle that was quite sophisticated. Wikipedia said Elasticsearch was a bit more popular, but that wasn't really the reason, but I thought, okay, plus 0.1. But there was a bundle that seemed to work quite well, that did auto-indexing, quite a low learning curve, could get into it relatively quickly. Yeah.
Can I add to it? So on one of the projects we actually did a bit of benchmark on Elasticsearch and Solar, and in our specific case Solar was like about 2 times faster, but we were doing like indexing like 300,000 documents a day and then doing like really specific queries. So I think that's the best thing you can do, is just like if you have a specific kind of queries that you want to do, just benchmark it between both of them and then make the decision.
Cool. Yeah.
Is there a Symfony bundle for the spatial logic?
Yes, there is. It's approaching stability with first features. It's just not there yet. It's called Elasticsearch Bundle. It's an alpha at the moment. It'll be there at some point, but it lacks most features. Doesn't have auto-indexing, no doctrine, listeners. Yes.
Is there still an easy way to, or is there yet an easy way to include multiple knots in an Elasticsearch query?
Multiple what? Sorry.
Knots. So if I want to include X, Y, and Z, is there an easy way to do that?
Yes, there's. There's at must, at should, and at must not. I left it off for no reason.
Yay!
You might be heresy, but why would you
That is yay.
do not consider to avoid all the dependency problems which goes on? Speaking JSON API
The reason was kind of the time constraint. It was a project with a certain timeline, and I was positively impressed by the low learning curve of this, auto-indexing, taking care of most things. It would have been possible to use the JSON API straight away, just using Guzzle. Potentially more elegant, but a lot harder to achieve. Cool, thank you.